It was a case like no other. 9 innocent lives cast into jeopardy. They awaited my arrival that dreaded night in shock and oblivious to the baffling revelations that were due to unfold. Blessed with a gift to see the world uniquely, supreme confidence in my own ability to dissect a crime scene with clinical precision, both forensically and psychologically, often led in the early years of my career to accusations of hubris. Though conversely, my progressively astonishing accomplishments subsequently provoked widespread speculation that I must employ preternatural powers of clairvoyancy in my art. Of course, the reality on both counts was nothing as such. It was merely an innate acuity of wit, exceptional sagacity, and an immensely powerful mind. Many murder cases have passed by over the years, solved effortlessly, as would Pythagoras have solved rudimentary arithmetic. My last case demonstrated beyond question my inimitable intellectual prowess after I was able to identify the culprit within mere seconds of entering the crime scene. But this night was to be different. In all my years as the greatest living detective, revered by the most esteemed intellectuals in the world, and previously unshakable in nerve and collectedness, even I was to be unbalanced by the nefarious events that lay ahead of me that fateful night at Wartsan Hall. I have hitherto uncovered truths that have defied belief. Acts of such abhorrent depravity, they were beyond comprehension. But this case, the case of Wartsan Hall, would transcend all my preconceptions of conventional motive and immorality. Besides my towering intellect, another trait crucial for seizing the uppermost pinnacle of mastery in my profession, as I irrefutably have, is an unwavering fearlessness and nerves of cut diamond. But there was an instinctive trepidation about the case that night that I could not easily dismiss. A disquieting apprehension that I hadn't felt in many years, and an unshakable feeling that I was being watched.
What a ghastly nightmare. Oh, Phil, it just doesn't feel real.
I know, Connie, darling. It's the shock. Makes it feel almost like it's not really happening.
Oh, Phil, but it's so horrible. It's like there's an invisible wall between me and the real world. I feel completely disassociated. Please tell me it will pass.
Of course it will, darling. Dr. Attrick? Dr. Attrick?
Verdammtes Wahns, Lucia.
Sorry, boy. I didn't mean to startle you.
Wie bitte? Das habe ich nicht gehört. Arschloch. My apologies, I did not hear.
Sorry, I was just hoping that you could give my darling some reassurance that these feelings of disassociation will pass.
Insurance? Yeah, possibly. Though I'd wager more likely something to do with a vast inheritance.
No, reassurance that these feelings of detachment will pass.
Oh, yeah, so of course that will pass, yeah. Yeah, this is possibly something in the medical profession that we call depersonalization or derealization. A troubling condition often caused by excessive stress or trauma, of which bearing witness to the death of an individual could easily induce. One might feel emotionally disconnected from people, or your surroundings can appear two-dimensional or artificial, a bit like living in a dream.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, it is rare, but episodes can sometimes take months or even years to pass. But they will.
Everyone just needs to relax. The inspector will be here soon, and I'm sure we'll be able to go home shortly.
I've never seen a dead body before.
I'm no stranger to dead bodies. I've seen 17.
Thank God.
We have been expecting you, sir. The guests are now in the study. Please, this way.
Not quite, my dear, but close. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Usually I would say good, but perhaps not in these circumstances. May I introduce myself? My name is Detective Inspector Storbart Vashitigler, and this is my assistant, Felix. Well, we do have a little to get through this evening, so I may as well start promptly. Before we look into the harrowing events that have happened this evening, perhaps you will allow me to run through my case notes firstly to ensure the foundations are in order. You can then either confirm or contest. Is that fair?
Don't you need to inspect the crime scene first?
I do not. I approach a case as if listening to a philharmonic rendition of a work by one of the great composers. The chamber hall is largely irrelevant. yet each component part, each note in a melody, the atonal harmony, deceptive cadence, whether it has self-revealing pathos, Phrygian inflected sighing motifs, or is simply unsympathetically celestial, reveals a consistency of passion, a regularity of intent, and a truth beyond matter, of which any indistinct irregularity is preponderant. Do you follow? So, let's begin. I like to remain on my feet so it helps me to process my thoughts and take everything in. But please do all make yourselves comfortable. Now, I have the time of death recorded as 3 minutes past the hour of 8 and 32 seconds in the dining room. Can anyone offer me an account of exactly what happened?
Well, he just suddenly died. He was eating, and suddenly he just went. No signs of distress.
Convenient. Right. So you are all gathered here tonight for the reading of Sir Charles Wartsan's will.
Yes, I'm here this evening in the capacity of the executor, having been handed down the responsibility through grave circumstance.
Yes, of course. Grave circumstances indeed. And that would make you, Robert Pugh.
You're more than welcome to call me Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Now, please allow me to run through the events chronologically. I appreciate it as a long and distressing tale, but if I may, I will outline them as concisely as possible, more to refresh my memory than yours, I am sure. Charles left behind no remaining family. Through lamentable happenstance, his own death followed a chain of desperately unfortunate events. Less than a year preceding Charles Wartsan's death, the family suffered the most sickening misfortune when Charles's oldest son and heir accidentally slipped and fell headfirst into a wood chipper. Then, it was as if the cold hand of fate felt the Wartsans hadn't endured enough hardship. For just shy of 2 months later, an almost defying coincidence, Sir Charles's only remaining heir happened to arrive back at home at the estate just at the very moment the new family grand piano was being hoisted up through the window above the entrance. I think you're all aware of the ensuing tragedy that occurred. At first it appeared that Mrs. Wartsan, after suffering such unimaginable hardship, was going to somehow find the strength to pull through. That is, until she was found by Charles Wartsan himself, alongside a suicide note, having shot herself in the head. 3 times. And so, following this chain of unspeakable adversity, can any of you remind me of the pledge that Sir Charles Wartsan made?
Broccoli?
An excellent guess, considering that he's quite clearly deaf.
Without any remaining beneficiaries, siblings, or even nephews and nieces, Sir Wartsan reapportioned his vast estate to be redistributed amongst a small number of very close friends, colleagues, and employees.
Thank you, Rob. Indeed, Sir Charles did this only 2 weeks before the final and tragic episode of freakish coincidence that saw Charles's own demise, when he accidentally mistook the main door of his private jet for the lavatory, subsequently plummeting 10,000 feet to his peril. And so this brings me neatly to you all. I have before me a copy of the will, and if I may, I will now run through each of you to disclose this information and bring everything to the fore. In my masterful opinion, I believe this is now absolutely critical. Even after what little I have digested, I am already certain that we must treat this case no less than a murder inquiry. Now, Mr. Peacock, shall I start with you?
Of course. Anything I can do to assist. And please, call me Drew.
Of course. Thank you, Drew. Now, I see you served with Sir Charles in the Great War.
Indeed. We served together in the Lancashire Regiment, and fought together at the Third Battle of Ypres, West Flanders, also known as the Battle of Passchendaele, one of the most heavily contested areas of the Western Front. We suffered appalling conditions and terrible casualties. Ypres was decimated. There was mud, death and despair everywhere. And then, many hours into this most savage and barbaric conflict, Charles was hit quite badly by an enemy sniper whilst taking cover in a shell hole. I dragged him out amidst the barrage of German artillery and carried him into the ruins of an old chapel. My single-handed resistance and intense rate of fire must have convinced the advancing German soldiers that they faced an entire platoon rather than a lone soldier. And they retreated, which allowed me time to carry the wounded Charles over my shoulder and out of harm's way. I carried Charles many miles through hostile terrain until eventually we reached the English trenches, where our gallant medics were finally
Thank
able
you, Drew.
Yes.
A most courageous story.
Indeed.
I must conclude at this juncture that it was Mr. Peacock in the dining room with the lead pipe. I'm sorry, it's my little joke. I don't often get such an opportunity. Mr. Peacock, as I am sure you're aware, among Mr. Wartsan's many talents, he was a renowned and enthusiastic taxidermist. He bequeathed to you the most precious and cherished piece of his entire collection, the late family pet ferret, Neville. And, I'm sorry, who are you?
Fine, thank you. And how are you?
That's Dr. Attrick, an Austrian professor. He handles some of Charles's overseas investments.
Ah, yes, Jerry. Was left the family Tupperware almost complete with the exception of 2 lids. And the remaining 4 months of Mr. Wartsan's Netflix subscription. Anyway, now we come to the partners, although not wedded, Mr. Accio of Italian descent and a Miss Lingus.
Guilty! That would be us, Phil and Connie.
Indeed, he left 1 item for each of you. For Connie, his wife's Braun LS 500 lady shaver, a Christmas present she never used, still in original packaging, and with a receipt from Woolworths should you wish to return it. And for Phil, Mr. Wartsan's remaining stockpile of Just for Men Ash Brown. And Mr. Timothy Burr?
Yes.
Chief Yardsman and groundskeeper at Wartsan Hall?
Yes.
It appears you were left. It appears you were left a spade.
Yes.
And Mr. Ware, Mr. Bartholomew Anthony Ware, an old family friend. You had a rather significant item passed down to you.
Yes, I did.
A piece that had been included in Sir Wartsan's art and historical artifact collection in the Grand Hall. The Shroud of Turin, no less, framed behind Silatech armored glass with a UV filter.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when valued for probate, the piece was carbon dated all the way back to 1987. It still, however, remains a significant part of the Wartsan legacy.
Indeed.
So, just the two of you left. Mr. Monk?
Friends call me Chip.
Yes, indeed. And Mrs. Stitz. So, Chip, you received Sir Wartsan's entire Betamax collection of videotapes in excess of 3,000 items. Additionally, one VHS video player that needs repairing, with parts that are not manufactured anymore. And Mrs. Stitz, Mrs. Norma Stitz. You received I can't seem to find it. Mr. Pugh, would you mind?
Of course. Let me have a quick look here. Yeah. A pen.
And so, that finally brings us to the deceased guest, Mr. Pott. Yes, Jack was Sir Charles Wartsan's reliable and regular pizza delivery driver, with whom he built an enduring companionship over the years. He was bequeathed one 5-bedroom beachfront villa on the Amalfi Coast, Italy, including Sir Charles's stable of 9 Derby-winning Arabian thoroughbred horses, one 3-bedroom luxury Balinese villa with mountaintop views, one 19th century 8-bedroom chateau in Saint-Tropez with approximately 250 hectares of land, one luxury 6-bedroom villa on its own private island of outstanding natural beauty in the Seychelles, the Wartsan Hall estate along with all remaining items and collections within, his stock certificates including a 28% share in Apple Computers, 15% share in Amazon, and a healthy 44% share in Tesla. And finally, Sir Charles Wartsan's remaining personal fortune amounting to approximately £847 billion sterling. It is time, however, to be upfront with you all. As I have been talking, some startling revelations have come to the fore, leading me to believe that there is no necessity to examine the body or the crime scene. In fact, I am certain already of two things. Firstly, that the heinous events of this evening are in fact nothing to do with the inheritance whatsoever. Secondly, that the killer is almost certainly within this room. It was immediately clear we weren't dealing with a crime of passion here. Astonishingly, it is also apparent to me now that it is neither the result of a bitter and overwhelming envy. One thing I am certain of, however, is that this isn't the work of an amateur. At least that is, in the sense of calculated immorality. If there is only one thing that I have no doubt of at this stage, it is that beyond the reach of rational and traditional thought, the killer we are dealing with here has almost omnipotent qualities. Pansophical and masterful at realizing the outcome of our trials before we have even begun. Therefore, if there is indeed any way to gain an advantage over such an impregnable foe, one must think beyond all 6 walls of the box, almost to another dimension entirely. I must be honest with you all. Never in my career have I encountered such a formidable adversary. Please don't be alarmed, and this may sound preposterous considering the amount of time I've been here, but I fear already the increasingly chilling possibility that none of us are going to get out of here alive. Oh, I'm awfully sorry. Please allow me to elaborate. My suspicions were first aroused when I began to interact with you all. It became apparent almost immediately that the majority of you lack the substance and refined character normally expected of rounded individuals.
How dare you?
Please, bear with me. It didn't take long to extrapolate from your various backstories, or lack of, more pertinently, and the desperate lack of any logical correlation that this is all nothing less than a nonsensical load of piffle. This may sound absurd, but in addition to a number of other elements I will share with you forthwith, I was led to conclude irrefutably that we are trapped within the framework of a poorly made amateur film production. All the clues are right before your very eyes. Look carefully at the base of Mr. Attrick's chair. If you examine it more carefully, you may notice that the legs appear to be ungrounded and floating an inch above the floor, an example of lazy and inexperienced chroma key compositing. And look over here. Again, another example of such standard green screen artistry. You can see where the light stand has been crudely copy and pasted over Mr. Burr to give the illusion that he is standing behind it. The glass, however, is not transparent and the tones have not been matched diligently enough. And talking of backgrounds, please look at the detailing on this first window. Now, observe the second window. At a glance, they give the illusion of appearing very similar, but on closer inspection, one can see the detailing is subtly different. the mullions, the transoms, the lead canes. In a house of this magnificence and historical richness, this kind of discrepancy does not happen. It is evident beyond a shadow of a doubt that these windows are not just unusually contrastive, they are in fact sourced from entirely different properties. And Mr. Ware, your moustache is so laughably fake, it's not even the remotest bit convincing. And Mr. Peacock, in terms of continuity, you appear to have worn at least 3 different bow ties during the course of this exchange. Additionally, this is the 1950s and your current waistcoat appears to be purchased from Marks & Spencer circa 1982. And Netflix, Amazon, the clues were here all along. Not one of us has a believable backstory or personality, apart from Mr. Peacock, of course. Some meagre research was clearly undertaken for his character, but after that, I fear, all interest was lost. And Mr. Burr, as chief groundsman, if I were to ask you, for example, why you thought Wartsan Hall was widely regarded by leading horticulturists as having one of the finest Grade 2 listed gardens of its type in southern England, your response would be...
Yes.
My point precisely. And Mrs. E. Norma Stitz, who didn't even speak when she had the opportunity to, which leads me to deduce that we are dealing with such a low-budget production, it was felt that purchasing yet another lavalier condenser microphone was needlessly extravagant. And so I know you must all be enormously disorientated and concerned. You must also be profoundly confused as to the meaning of all this. I appreciate it raises some deeply tormenting existential questions. Please allow me to resolve my thoughts and offer what clarity I can. I believe that the killer of our dearly departed Jack Pot was no less than the very producer of this production. Desperately uninspired and lacking a credible murder mystery plot, he or she committed this atrocious act in order to put some meat on the bones of an otherwise terrible script. Which leads me to my chilling conclusion. You may have noticed that the integrity of my chroma key image had been slowly deteriorating over the course of this investigation. With hindsight, I now know that this wasn't part of the shoddy workmanship, but in fact the producer's sinister plan to eradicate me from existence. So you see, if we can ascertain who the producer is, we will find our killer. I knew it! It was rational to assume in such an amateur production that the producer would have taken a role himself. And a very clever one, it transpires. My very own personal assistant, Felix Butts.
Like you've always told me, Master. Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. Don't you know how difficult it is to come up with an idea that sticks to the genre's conventions but still somehow manages to offer something fresh? By killing Mr. Pot myself, I may have just turned this production into something a bit more interesting than it otherwise would have been. I've been writing and producing it as I go along, and I think up to this point at least it's been alright. You never know, maybe I'll even get 100 likes on Facebook.
After all our years of comradeship, Felix, I am on the one hand bitterly disappointed in you. On the other hand, I profess a deep admiration.
All these years? I only wrote you about a month ago.
Your motives are sound, your methods undeniably Promethean. If it wasn't for the fastidiousness and towering intellect of a formidable detective such as I am certain this case would have remained an enigma. Without conscious thought, I knew from the outset that this was the work of a preeminent foe. I knew our fate was sealed.
Of course. Why didn't I think of that before? I suppose that's why you're the greatest detective that's ever lived, and I'm only your meagre assistant.
In fact, why am I even still talking like this? What's the... I can just edit you out. Well, that's that, I guess. You can all go home. Yes. Yes. What do you say? Okay. Right, so number 18, Mr. Monk carried on.
So, Chip, you received Sir Wartsan's entire Betamax collection of videotapes in excess of 3,000 items. Additionally, one VHS video player that needs repairing, with parts that are not manufactured anymore. And Mrs. Stitz, Mrs. Norma Stitz.
Trying to say it with a bit more of a gap though, it's not... Mrs. Stitz.